On February 22, 2024, the Albanian parliament passed law number 21/2024, which amended the country's protected areas legislation. Shortly after, Kushner's Albanian resort plans became widely public. Then in January 2026, Edi Rama, the Prime Minister of Albania, announced that Albania had accepted Donald Trump's invitation to join the Board of Peace as a founding member. And just a few days ago, Ivanka Trump was on a podcast where she said this.
I'm working on an incredible project with my husband, the Mediterranean. It's massive in scale. We were on a friend's boat. We swam to the islands. We went on a hike barefoot all the way up to the top, and we were just captivated.
She also describes Sazan as kind of like a virgin island, a beautiful sea, but also as a place to be conquered.
It feels more like a challenge than anything else.
What she's basically describing is an island with no history, no ownership, no inhabitants. The reality, though, is very different. But before we get into that, I want to make sure we're all clear on what's going on in Albania right now. Why is a socialist prime minister enabling this Kushner-Trump takeover of a protected island behind his people's backs? And once we get that, we can zoom out a bit and look at how what's happening in Sazan goes way beyond Albania. As part of Trump's Board of Peace, Albania's prime minister has effectively become a pawn in the global ambitions of the Trump elite. This story isn't just about Albania, it's about all of us. My name is Alice, welcome back to my channel. Many protesters and critics of the project see this as a potential corruption scandal.
Albania belongs only to Albanians, and Albania is not for sale.
The government argues that people wouldn't be protesting if it weren't Kushner and Trump, but protesters are demanding transparency about its dealing with the Kushner-Trump family. In fact, Affinity Partners, the company behind the investment, is not above criticism here. This isn't the first time a Trump-branded development linked to the region has triggered controversy. Look at this Serbian project, for example, in 2024. It's centered on a planned Trump-branded luxury hotel in Belgrade on the site of the former Yugoslav Defense Ministry, a protected historic landmark. And guess what? Prosecutors later charged several Serbian officials, including the culture minister, over alleged irregularities in the documentation and approval process that helped clear the way for the project. After the indictments, Affinity Partners withdrew from the development. So now people are asking whether something similar is happening in Albania, another Balkan country that has attracted foreign investors' attention. Are we looking at a new corruption scandal? Let's find out. So here are the main elements that lead to those suspicions. First, the project received strategic investor status. This is a very special status, and critics said that this gives major advantages, including faster administrative procedures and government support in pushing the project through approvals. Then second, Albania changed the rules on construction in protected areas. This is another major controversy. We mentioned it earlier. In 2024, the parliament removed the previous ban on construction in protected areas. Environmental groups argue this opened the door to developments that would previously have been harder or even impossible to approve. Now 3, lack of transparency and public consultation. This is probably the strongest criticism. Environmental groups and local opponents to the project say that there hasn't been enough transparency at every step of the project. And 4, property rights disputes. You see, land ownership along the Albanian coast is still tangled in disputes going back to the post-communist transition. So basically, it's very likely that there are still unresolved questions over who owns parts of the land involved. All these 4 points matter when we try to figure out whether this is actually corruption or not. Because, yeah, there are different levels of corruption. Level 1 would be ordinary policy change. The government changes laws because it wants more tourism, investment. Then there's policy change benefiting a known project. That would be level 2. So the government changes laws knowing a specific project will benefit. Then we have improper favoritism. This is level 3. That means that the government changes rules mainly to help a particular investor. And then you have level 4, blatant corruption. Officials receive personal benefits, money, favors, in exchange for decisions. So far, the evidence suggests we're somewhere in category 2 or 3. Editing Alice here, just a quick note to say that there is actually an ongoing investigation, anti-corruption investigation, as you can see on this article by Politico. So yeah, this might go up to level 4, we don't know yet. In the Serbian case though, level 4 seems to apply. But in Sazan, this still isn't clearly corruption, but that doesn't make it any less controversial. This case stands out because of the environmental impacts, because it involves the Trump Trump and Kushner families, and because of the island itself. Trump and an island doesn't sound great on paper, brings back bad old memories. So effectively, all eyes are on Sazan, on the protesters, on the Prime Minister. Edi Rama, the Prime Minister, has been a dominant figure in Albanian politics for over a decade now. Before national politics, he was an artist and the mayor of Tirana, and he still comes across more like a charismatic project manager than a traditional politician. His vision for Albania has largely focused on attracting investment and putting the country on the international map. But at the same time, his tenure has raised concerns about how closely his decisions can align with powerful investors. Even though he leads a socialist party, Rama isn't especially ideological. He tends to see big development projects as tools to reshape Albania's image and economy, which helps explain his strong support for the Kushner result despite the controversy. Rama said in 2023, quote, "To put the record straight, what 400 yachts can generate is equal to what can be earned from 40,000 low-cost visitors. In other words, less Ryanair, more luxury." And you can see similar patterns across the Balkans. Leaders like Aleksandar Vučić and before him Milo Đukanović have built their political appeal on a similar promise: bring in foreign investment and plug the country into global markets. They come from different parties, sure, different countries, but it's often the same logic. Economic growth becomes the main measure of success. You want to make Ursula von der Leyen happy, basically. You know how Europe treats its weaker members. Meanwhile, questions about who owns the land and what gets lost in the process tend to matter less. And that's why thousands of people are now protesting in the streets of Albania against the forces of destruction. If you've watched even just one video from the protest against the luxury resort, you've probably seen this: a flamingo. Many flamingos. Now, we are used to animals showing up in protest at this point: the Pikachu in Turkey, the frogs and dinosaurs of Portland. Now, the flamingos have become a symbol of the Albanians' protests because they depend on the Nata Lagoon wetland, one of Albania's most important habitats for migratory birds. Environmental groups explain that large-scale tourism can disrupt their ecosystem. So the concern is not just about protecting flamingos themselves, but about preserving a rare coastal wetland that supports wildlife in Albania and across the Mediterranean. So this is ultimately about protecting life against what you could call an anti-life movement. Now, I'm being serious. I mean, these guys, the Kushners and other billionaires, are obsessed with building bunkers and don't give a F about the future of humanity. They would rather build walls and isolate themselves on private islands, and the symbolism of this is significant. Ivanka Trump's story about how they discovered the island and decided to settle it sounds almost providential. The image that popped in my head when she described swimming from the boat to the island and climbing it barefoot immediately brought me to this painting by John Gast. You put Ivanka's face on it and that's basically it, right? I'm sure some of you are familiar with this painting. It's often used to illustrate the concept of manifest destiny. Manifest destiny was the 19th century belief that the United States was destined by God and by history to expand across North America. Many supporters of this belief saw American expansion not just as a political or economic goal, but as a divine mission to spread their values and way of life. The painting looks almost harmless, #cottagecore, but the reality of manifest destiny is extremely dark. We'll get to that in the last chapter. But yeah, the divine element here is crucial. The word destiny implied that expansion was not just desirable, but part of a bigger plan. It gives territorial conquest a moral and religious legitimacy in the eyes of its supporters.
It feels more like a challenge than anything else.
Another image that came to mind is this one. This is a representation of the city upon a hill. The phrase city upon a hill originates from Jesus' sermon on the Mount in the New Testament, where it evokes the image of a community whose conduct is visible to all. It was first used by the Puritans in the early 17th century to describe their settlement in New England, and later became a powerful symbol in American political thought. It's very similar to Manifest Destiny. It expresses the idea that the United States has a special role as an example to the world. There is some echo of that tradition in Ivanka Trump's account of discovering the Albanian island by describing it as almost an untouched paradise encountered while swimming. Barefoot, along the coast, she presents the landscape as something waiting to be seen and brought into a different kind of future. These two similar universes, Manifest Destiny and A City Upon a Hill, share something in common, a call to build. Ivanka Trump strongly identifies with that role.
I was so sure my whole life that I would be a builder.
Being a builder is part of her DNA, you see. The Trump fortune began with Donald Trump's grandfather, Friedrich Trump, who immigrated from Germany in the late 19th century and made money during what we call the Klondike Gold Rush before moving into real estate. His son, Fred Trump, built the family's wealth through large-scale housing developments in Brooklyn and Queens by taking advantage of the post-war housing boom and government-backed programs. Lots of public money behind all those billionaires. But anyway, Donald Trump inherited and expanded the business, moving into Manhattan and turning the family name into a global real estate brand. Ivanka Trump obviously grew up in that world, making her the latest generation to carry this legacy.
It was me at 17 looking out over the New York City skyline. And I'm talking about like how I'm going to impact this unbelievably iconic cityscape. The confidence that you can only have when you're 17, you know?
Now the Kushner family story begins later. Jared Kushner's grandparents were Holocaust survivors who arrived in the United States after World War II and settled in New Jersey. Jared Kushner's father, Charles Kushner, built a vast real estate empire centered on apartment complexes and suburban developments across New Jersey. Like the Trumps and the Kushners combined property development with political networking. They became influential figures well beyond the real estate sector itself. And now you merge the two families, you bring them together, and you get this project, this 14,000 hectare Sazan Island, the culmination of their dynasty's ambitions. But calling the Trumps and Kushners builders is almost too generous. Because what's happening in Albania isn't just a building project. In fact, the two imaginaries we introduced earlier, The City Upon a Hill and Manifest Destiny, are nothing more than settler projects, built on narratives that historically justified displacement and the erasure of existing communities. Sazan Island is no different. Sure, the island is essentially uninhabited right now, but that doesn't make it lifeless. Remember the flamingos? And sure, our flamingo friends don't have individual rights like we do, or documentation proving ownership of the land, but that's the region they live in and depend on. Isn't that enough? You see, settlers have this tendency to refuse to acknowledge life on the land they covet. Through storytelling, they describe the places they settle as providential, implying that a force stronger than anyone's rights or resistance is pushing them in a certain direction. In that sense, they are no longer responsible for the destruction they cause. That responsibility gets displaced onto this bigger providential cause. They are just doing what they are supposed to do. It's a calling, it's destiny. But Albanians aren't naive. They know exactly what's happening here. That's why thousands of them are in the streets protesting. The protests have largely been led by environmental groups rather than political parties. At the center is PPNEA, Albania's oldest conservation NGO, which has spent months campaigning against the project. Scientists, bird experts, and local activists have also joined the marches. The Together movement, a small left-wing political organization, has also helped mobilize people by framing the issue not just as an environmental dispute, but as a question of who gets to decide the future of public land.
As an Albanian, I will tell you why we are rioting. We are rioting because there is no schools, there is no pension for pensioners, there is no hospital, there is no medicine, there is no parks for kids. There is no normal salary.
Alongside the rallies, activist Eva Buzo organized a symbolic action, a swim around Sazan Island, that helped draw international attention to the campaign and led me to make this video you're watching right now. All eyes are on the island because it's becoming a symbol of global resistance, life against death. All around the world, people are waking up to the cynicism of elites who sign bills, contracts, laws that destroy the resources of the many for the enjoyment of the privileged few. What the Ivanka Trump interview shows, what the clip of 17-year-old Ivanka overlooking New York City shows, is that they view the world as their playground. But Sazan has something special. Its location isn't random at all. It's difficult to look at the chronology of events from the changes in law in 2024 to Albania joining Trump's Board of Peace in 2025, which include Kushner as a member, and not think, Shady. Well, this last chapter is all about exploring how shady this project really is. We talked about the potential for corruption already, but here I want to look back at the history of Sazan. Sazan Island has had a surprisingly strategic history for such a small, uninhabited place. After passing between different empires and states over the centuries, it came under Albanian control after World War II and became one of the country's most heavily militarized zones during the communist era. Positioned at the entrance of the Bay of Vlora, it was seen as a key defensive outpost during the Cold War. Albania's alliance with the Soviet Union in the 1950s brought military investment to the island. They built tunnels, bunkers, even naval infrastructures. For decades, Sazan was closed to civilians and effectively disappeared from public life. Then, following the collapse of communism in the early 1990s, its military importance decreased and the island was gradually opened to visitors, though it remained largely untouched and unused. Today, its abandoned military infrastructure sits alongside protected natural landscapes. So yeah, contrary to what Ivanka implied in her interview, Sazan does have a history, a pretty significant one. It's no longer the kind of strategic asset it once was, but its location still carries a certain geopolitical weight. And that history is part of what prompted people to react so vividly. A place that spent decades as a secret military outpost is now being reimagined as a luxury resort destination? What exactly are they going to do with the tunnels and abandoned bunkers? It's hard not to feel suspicious about it. The symbolism of the place is once again really something, and the Kushner Trump circle is aware of this. These guys have already been involved in other controversial projects before this one. Kushner is a member of the so-called Board of Peace, in charge of rebuilding Gaza. To them, political resistance is just another obstacle, like securing a permit or dealing with supplier delays. In fact, when asked about Gaza in a February 2024 interview at Harvard, Jared Kushner described the city's waterfront as potentially, quote, very valuable.
In Gaza's waterfront property, it could be very valuable.
And suggested that, from Israel's perspective, the best approach might be to move civilians out.
But I think from Israel's perspective, I would do my best to move the people out and then clean it up.
What struck many of us was the language itself. Rather than focusing on Palestinian self-determination or the genocidal policies of the Israeli government, Kushner emphasized the economic potential of the land and the possibility of reconstruction. Where's the humanity in that? The way the couple talk about Sazan is rhetorically similar. Ivanka Trump talks about a challenge. She says she wants to work with people who have integrity. But what they mean by that is work discipline. They want architects who will provide the vision they have for Sazan, regardless of the obstacles that might come their way. Ivanka describes this real estate project as the culmination of her career. In the interview, she explains that she likes to try new things and shift directions. Remember, not too long ago, in 2020, she and her husband were asked by her father to help him as he became president of the United States, despite him having no prior experience in electoral politics. Older interviews did show that Donald Trump long had an interest in politics.
Nobody's really hitting it right. The Democrats are too far left, the Republicans are too far right, and I don't think anybody's hitting the chord. Not the chord that I want to hear, and not the chord that other people want to hear.
You know, billionaires like him are regularly approached by politicians for donations. It's part of the New York elite networking. What Ivanka Trump shares in this interview is interesting though. She seems to understand that she has been part of an elite system in which politics is just another way of facilitating business, and business another way of shaping politics.
The decision to not go in. And I think we both knew, like, he's asking us for help. He's giving us an enormous opportunity to give back to a country we love so much. And even if it's decades ahead of schedule, we should be so honored to do it.
In other words, the couple's involvement in politics is only just beginning. Their ambitions are large and we should at least keep an eye on them, or, like the people of Albania, resist them with all the power we have at our disposal, wherever this project takes shape. Thank you for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, to subscribe if it's not already done. Big thank you as well to my patrons, and a special thank to top tier patrons: Malter, I'm literally a fork, Ahmed, Sibev, Jose, Nofol, Fred, Hongxing Wang, Paul Louis Agneau, Patrick Button, Jeff Lee, Tayab, Nick, Brandon, James, Ojuel, Patrick, Boris, Ria, Koriji, Tristan, Christopher, Ian, Donage, Alex, Manuel, Christopher France, and Perry, and thank you to the other ones who prefer to stay anonymous. That's it for me, that's it for today. I'll see you very, very soon. Salut!